I Love the View, Episode 7.
Mr. Reagan.
Now, last episode, the women had weird moments of clarity where they were defending conservatives, telling her leftist actor friends not to make blacklists of conservatives that they refused to work with. It was very interesting. This week, they're back to their normal crazy selves. So without further ado, let's get into it.
I'm supposed to say that it's a moment from last night that you all were talking about this morning, and you, Chelsea, were talking about it. Take a look.
We are seeing all over this country women's reproductive rights under attack, and God bless Kamala, but you know what? Women should not be the only ones taking up this cause and this fight. And then it is not just because women are our daughters and our friends and our wives. It's because women are people, and people deserve to control their own body.
So that was kind of a special moment, I thought, last night, because so often, with all due respect to the men in the audience, when women's rights are discussed, men often start with as a father of a daughter, or as the son of a mother, or as the brother to a sister, or as a husband to my wife. No! It shouldn't matter. Like, our human rights are our human rights, and those should be respected and protected and advanced because we're human beings, not because of your relationship to a woman in your own life. And I was so grateful that he made that point so strongly last night.
He did. That's a good point.
Exactly. We conservatives have been making this point forever. But you know what? Chelsea is being super hypocritical here. If it were a pro-life guy, she'd be saying, you don't have the right to talk about this issue because you're a man. But we do have the right to talk about it, and I think Corey is right about that. But honestly, I think that he would pivot too if it were a pro-life guy. That is the hypocrisy of the left. Rules for thee, but not for me. All right, I would love to just continue right on, but unfortunately, I have to sell you something. When Noble Gold released this solid silver Trump 2020 Freedom Coin, they had no idea how successful President Trump would be or how much interest there would be in their coins. 3 years later, the commander-in-chief has shown himself to be a rare leader of courage who follows through on his promises. And over at Noble Gold, they've sold so many coins that they've had to have a second pressing. As a result, and by popular demand, they are now releasing this stunning, brand new Commander-in-Chief design to the world. This coin is highly unusual, not just because it's struck from an ounce of real .999 fine solid silver, not because it's handcrafted in America, not even because it's such an incredible value, but because of its astonishing design features. You should see the contrast between the gleaming silver of the background with the cleverly wrought matte of President Trump's profile and the American flag. It's truly breathtaking. This beautiful coin would grace the desk, display cabinet, or shelf of any patriotic American supporter of Donald Trump. Be the envy of all your friends, or buy some for them as well. Treat yourself to one of these fabulous souvenirs today. Go to TrumpCoin2020.com and use the code Mr. Reagan to save $5 off per coin. This is a limited time offer, so make sure that you get yours today. Go to TrumpCoin2020.com and use the code Mr. Reagan to receive the $5 off per coin. All right, well, now that torture is over with, listen, I joke about my sponsors. They're awesome. The fact that they sponsor me is very cool, and I actually like all the products and services, but I know nobody likes to see ads. That's why I always say that I torture you guys. All right, now let's get back to talking about the evil witches of the coven. I mean the ladies of the View. How silly of me. But in terms of what they're actually saying, I think Corey and Chelsea are both making great points here. But again, as is always the case with the left, it is one-sided, totally hypocritical. Now, all that said, Cory Booker did once save a woman from a burning building.
Newark Mayor Cory Booker had just arrived home Thursday night when he saw his next-door neighbor's house in flames.
As the last woman was coming out, I was going up the stairs, and she's screaming that her daughter is still in the building. And so at that point, me and the detective ascended the stairs, something exploded, and he did the right thing. He's like, I've got to get you out of here. You know, there's no way I'm going to leave the house when a person's screaming for help. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Booker pushed past the detective into the burning kitchen, but through the flames, he couldn't locate 47-year-old Zena Hodge. She finally yelled out from a side room.
When I heard her voice start speaking to me and enabling me to find her, at that point I just didn't think. I grabbed her and ran.
Booker says embers fell on them as they made their way out of the burning house, with both of them collapsing on the sidewalk.
And that's why I'm saying, people are saying, oh, you're so courageous. The reality is I didn't feel any courage. I felt fear, and I've never been so almost convinced that this was it. It was time to hope that I was going up and not down.
Cory Booker ran into a burning building and saved a woman's life. That's crazy. I did not know this until like yesterday when I was collating these clips. The truth is, I don't think anybody knows about this, except for maybe people in New Jersey. Cory, why is this not your entire presidential campaign ad? I mean, what are you, like in single digits right now? I mean, you could definitely jump up to at least like 13% if you put this out there. So yeah, this should be your campaign ad. Just this. You know what? I can't stand Cory Booker, but he will always have that one cool point for that one act. Well done, Cory Booker. You have won my respect a little tiny bit. Maybe he is Spartacus.
So you know who is taking heat from both sides over his decision to pull troops out of Syria. It all came to a head at the White House yesterday when Democratic leaders walked out of a meeting. And so now he's claiming it was Pelosi who had the meltdown. It's a little bit hard to believe because she's kind of the coolest cucumber of the bunch. This is, I guess, one of the pictures that you know who sent out, said this is her melting down on him, and then there was another one, and 3 pictures of Democrats, and they said, do you think they like me? And it was just like, dude, really, this is what you're doing?
She looks like a boss in that picture. Yeah. She doesn't look like she's melting down at all. Yeah. All I noticed was, why is she the only woman at that table?
Well, that's something else. The guys on the other side, the ones who are on his side are like, I'm not with him, I don't agree with him, I don't want to look at him. They're all cowering on that side.
What is she talking about? It looks to me like everybody is embarrassed by the shrill, unhinged woman in the room making a fool out of themselves. They're like, oh my gosh, somebody get this woman out of here. She's crazy. That's the same look that I gave this morning when I was in the Starbucks and some random woman started screaming. Do you remember this morning? What was she screaming?
She was speaking with her glaze in the window.
Oh, she was yelling at her reflection in the window. She was yelling at her reflection in the window. Yeah, and like the manager came over and he was like, "Can I help you?" He's like, "You're being kind of." I mean, she was clearly like an insane homeless person. That's what Nancy Pelosi looks like in this picture. And all the guys are just like, I don't know what to do. It's very awkward when you're dealing with like a crazy person screaming. It's very awkward. And that is how I interpret this image. Joy's bias is absurd. But you know what? It's not really worth dwelling on because Joy's absurdity is very well-tread territory.
Calling a woman unhinged is to me like calling a woman shrill, talking about her warming up. It's a deeply sexist thing to say about Speaker Pelosi, so I can't take what you're saying seriously in any way.
Okay, but what if she is unhinged? What if she is shrill? What are you supposed to call her? You know, everybody in the media is like celebrating this photo. Like, wow, look at her stand up to that row of white men. So I guess what they want us to call Nancy Pelosi when she's shrill and unhinged is like a strong, independent woman.
But we told you he's an Article 4 free inhabitant, so he does not have to have a license.
All right, you're under arrest.
No, I'm not. You're raping me. This is rape. This is rape. This is rape.
Relax.
Wait a minute. Right.
Able to introduce for the first time ever anywhere the 45th President of the United States of America, Donald.
On the shoulder. You adjust the microphone as you told, man.
The proceeding was a montage of strong, independent women, just like Nancy Pelosi. Not shrill, not unhinged in any way. Strong and independent. Anything else you might call them is sexist. Hey, got Valerie to laugh. Okay. I mean, you can literally claim that any criticism is sexist if it's directed at a woman. Seriously though, Megan, what are the words we're allowed to call women? Make us a list so that we can ignore it and then ridicule you, please. Gosh, she laughed again. I got 2 laughs in the same bit. Oh my gosh, I'm on a roll.
Welcome back. So during a White House conference yesterday, Big Mouth Mick Mulvaney said that the next G7 summit will be held at Trump's own Doral Resort in Miami, which Democrats say is the most brazen example of corruption yet. So is he a cornered rat who's going to grab all the cash he can before he jumps ship? Hey, look, I have always said that he got into the presidency to make money. He never thought he would win. He thought he'll raise his profile and make money. This is his last grab because he knows he's going down now. He's going down.
He's saying he's not going to make any money from it, but that's just not true. It, at the very least, is going to give him free advertising, right? People pay millions and millions of dollars for this kind of advertising. And the Emoluments Clause was put there by our founding fathers for a reason, because they wanted to make sure that our presidents and other federal officers couldn't be swayed by foreign influence or the influence of money.
But he's already violated it, Sonny.
Many
Last year,
times.
foreign governments paid more than $1 million to Trump's company.
Exactly.
90% of that money was spent at Trump's GC hotel.
That's terrible.
So he's already violated the emolument. So what are we waiting for?
And the thing is, I think if you're in the middle of the country and you don't have any money and you're struggling to pay your bills because of this president, I think you care about the fact that he is using this presidency as a cash register for his company.
That's right.
I think you care a lot about that.
Trump was doing this at cost, okay? Him being president is advertising, all right? If we're going to scream emoluments every time a president indirectly benefits from being president, no one will ever be permitted to be president again. Do you think Barack Obama's book, Dreams from My Father, dipped in sales after he became president? No, it spiked in sales. Presidents are permitted to benefit indirectly from being president because it's impossible not to. Every Trump property is currently benefiting from the fact that he's president. There's nothing that he can do to stop that. But in this particular case, because he was going to host the summit at cost, he actually would have lost money because the rooms and conference rooms were all taken up by the summit, right? But those rooms could have gone to customers paying full price. So he would have directly lost money from this. Now, everybody always seems to claim that Trump is trolling whenever he says or does or tweets anything that irritates the left. And I think most of the time that isn't true. But this time, yeah, I think he knew that this was going to cause leftist heads to explode. Now, I do think that Trump thought it was a generous and positive thing to do. I mean, do you really think that Trump thinks that any resort in the world is better than his own? Come on, no. But at the same time, he knew that it would make leftists' heads spin. And far from being a deterrent, I think that it was definitely an added bonus. Joy Behar, Trump owns you, okay? You let yourself get so upset by him that he can essentially control your physiology just by saying, doing, or tweeting things that upset you. You really need to disconnect your emotions from the world of Donald Trump. It's like Joy Behar is playing a really addictive video game, and after 10 years dedicating her life to the game, she looks around at her disgusting room full of pizza boxes and empty Capri Sun packets, and she thinks, I've just wasted my life. She's actually addicted to hating Trump. And you know what? I think that dedicating that much time, energy, and emotion to a video game would be healthier. Just take a breath, Joy Behar. Set the controller down and go for a walk.
Acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney sat down with Chris Wallace yesterday. Trying to clean up the mess he made last week when he admitted that you-know-who withheld funds from the Ukraine until they investigated conspiracy theories about 2016 American presidential election. It did not go well.
What is she talking about? I watched the interview. It was great. He perfectly clarified what he was trying to say in that press conference. I think she's just repeating what she's seen in the sort of like leftist media, because I've actually seen a lot of headlines where it was like, Mulvaney's interview was a disaster, but it really wasn't. It was perfect. Like, I don't think she probably even actually watched it. If anything, Chris Wallace was being a real dick. And I actually loved that Mulvaney called Chris out on the whole do me a favor BS. Every leftist conflates do me a favor with the Biden thing. But the do me a favor line was about looking into the 2016 election interference. You can't just shuffle sentences around in a phone conversation and make it mean whatever you want it to mean, no matter what Adam Schiff thinks.
I want you to make up dirt on my political opponent, understand lots of it. And by the way, don't call me again. I'll call you when you've done what I asked. This is, in sum and character, what the president was trying to communicate.
Here, let me play what Mulvaney actually said.
President Trump is not a big fan of foreign aid. Never has been, still isn't. Doesn't like spending money overseas, especially when it's poorly spent. And that is exactly what drove this decision. I've been in the office a couple times with him talking about this. And he said, look, Mick, this is a corrupt place. Everybody knows it's a corrupt place. He's like, look, this is a corrupt place. I don't want to send them a bunch of money and have them waste it, have them spend it, have them use it to line their own pockets. Plus, I'm not sure that the other European countries are helping them out either. And I can't remember if it's $0 or near $0 from any European countries for lethal aid. You've heard the president say this, that we give them tanks and the other countries give them pillows. That's absolutely right. That as vocal as the Europeans are about supporting Ukraine, they are really, really stingy when it comes to lethal aid. And they weren't helping Ukraine, and that still to this day are not. And the president did not like that. So I know it was a long answer to your question, but I'm still going. So those were the driving factors. Did he also mention to me in the past the corruption related to the DNC server? Absolutely, no question about that. But that's it, and that's why we held up the money. This is a corrupt place. Everybody knows it's a corrupt place. Plus, I'm not sure that the other European countries are helping them out either. And they weren't helping Ukraine, and that still to this day are not. And the president did not like that. Those were the driving factors. But that's it, and that's why we held up the money.
There were two reasons that we held up the aid. The first one was the rampant corruption in Ukraine. Ukraine, by the way, Chris, is so bad in Ukraine that in 2014, Congress passed a law requiring us to make sure that corruption was moving in the right direction. So corruption's a big deal. Everybody knows it. The president was also concerned about whether or not other nations, specifically European nations, were helping with foreign aid to the Ukraine as well. We've talked about that for quite a while now. I did then mention that in the past, the president had mentioned for me to time about the DNC server. He'd mentioned the DNC server to other people publicly. He even mentioned it to President Zelensky in the phone call, but it wasn't connected to the aid, and that's where I think people got sidetracked this weekend at that press conference. Two reasons for holding back the aid. It is legitimate for the president to want to know what's going on with the ongoing investigation into the server. Everybody acknowledges that. At least I think most normal people do. It's completely legitimate to ask about that. Number two, it's legitimate to tie the aid to corruption. It's legitimate to tie the aid to foreign aid from other countries. That's what I was talking about with a three. Can I see how people took that the wrong way? Absolutely. But I never said there was a quid pro quo, because there isn't. So I recognize that folks, that I didn't speak clearly maybe on Thursday. Folks misinterpreted what I said, but the facts are absolutely clear, and they are there for everyone to see.
The only quid pro quo that could possibly be corrupt in this whole Ukraine thing is if Trump is trying to get the president of Ukraine to illegitimately accuse Biden of corruption. But first, Trump never did this. No one has claimed knowledge of even a hint of such a thing. There is only speculation by deranged Democrats. Secondly, Biden admitted to extorting the Ukrainian government, and it's possible that he did this exclusively to protect his son for his own personal gain. A potentially real corrupt quid pro quo.
Quid pro quo.
That's a quid pro quo that should be investigated. So even if Trump did demand this from Ukraine, it's only corrupt if he knows Biden is innocent. And how can he know that? There was an obvious conflict of interest. Manipulating foreign governments when there is a clear conflict of interest is textbook corruption. Maybe Biden was acting nobly, but we won't know that until we look under a few rugs. Leftists are trying to say that because Biden is campaigning against Trump, it's illegal for Trump to ask anyone to investigate Biden. Well, when did that become a rule? No investigating political opponents? The suspicion is that Trump will use the power of his office to inappropriately prosecute Biden. But the prosecution is not inappropriate if Biden is guilty. Running for president does not suddenly give you immunity to all crimes. If you kill somebody and your political opponent watches you do it, that opponent still has a responsibility to see you prosecuted for it. But none of that matters anyway, because Mulvaney states specifically none of the negotiations had anything to do with Biden.
The reason that we held back the aid were the two reasons I mentioned, and I can prove it to you. The aid flowed. Once we were able to satisfy ourselves that corruption was actually, they were doing better with it. We got that information from our folks, from the conversation with Mr. Zelensky. And once we were able to establish, we had the Office of Management Budget do research on other countries' aid to Ukraine. It turns out they don't give hardly any lethal aid, but they do give a considerable sum of money in non-lethal aid. Once those two things were cleared, the money flowed. There was never any connection between the flow of money and the service.
No quid pro quo.
Hillary Clinton surprised a lot of people during a podcast interview where she gave this ominous forecast about the 2020 presidential election. Take a listen.
I'm not making any predictions, but I think they've got their eye on somebody who's currently in the Democratic primary and are grooming her to be the third-party candidate. She's the favorite of the Russians. They have a bunch of, sites and bots and other ways of supporting her so far. And that's assuming Jill Stein will give it up, which she might not, because she's also a Russian asset.
Oh. So most people say she's clearly talking about candidate Tulsi Gabbard, and some other candidates are defending Tulsi getting called out like this. So what did you think when you heard that?
I mean, for me, honestly, Hillary's been dead on with so many things. She told us about Russia. She told us about the probable interference during the debate. She was Secretary of State. She has deep knowledge about world issues. I thought, where's the lie? I've often said that Tulsi is sort of the Trojan horse in this. I mean, she's polling only at 1.2%, yet she's still in the race. You have her being touted by people like Fox News personalities like Tucker Carlson.
She's endorsed.
She's endorsed by, by sort of the Russians.
David Duke.
David Duke. She has basically renounced that, but she's never renounced the Russian support. There have been about 20 Russian bot websites that have supported her since she's announced her run for the presidency.
She tweeted back and called Hillary a warmonger. Okay, so that does not do anything for me. She hasn't denied it. She hasn't said anything in her tweets. How dare you? It's outrageous. Of course I'm not. She didn't say that. No. She's just going after Hillary. And like you said, Hillary was right about almost everything. She's been exonerated with that nonsense that they pulled about her server already. And this idea that she's doing this to get back in the race, that she said that also, Tulsi. I don't buy that either. I don't think Hillary wants to go through it again. So I think that there's something, I don't say that Tulsi is an agent. I just think that she could be a useful idiot the way Trump is a useful idiot to the Russians. Yeah. That they see something. They say, oh, look, a useful idiot. Let's play this. And another point, the Republican Party knows that they cannot win without interference from Russia and maybe a voter suppression. They cannot win. Yeah. People in this country are against him now. And so they have to have it. And she's a perfect person to throw right in the middle of this. She's a perfect foil. I don't think that she wants to be, maybe. I don't know. She's coming here in a couple of weeks, so we can ask her.
This. That's funny, because Joy Behar is a useless idiot. Hillary has been right about almost everything. These women are insane. I can't believe that they're buying this. There's actually very little for me to say here because it's so absurd. I mean, they're loyal. They are loyal to Hillary. I will give them that. They're actually right that conservatives like Tulsi. But the reason we like her, and I said this yesterday on Gorka, is that Tulsi Gabbard thinks for herself.
But the funny thing, the really weird thing about it is yes, conservatives like Tulsi because Tulsi doesn't just repeat the Democrat line on everything all the time, constantly. Yeah. Right. That's why we like her, because she thinks for herself. It's not that she agrees with us on anything, just that she thinks for herself.
Wow, now you've nailed it. See, that's why he's Mr. Reagan. Chris Cole's just nailed it. We respect people who can think for themselves even when we disagree with them. On the left, if you disagree with the left, you must be shut down, you must be deplatformed, you must be called a racist, a fascist. Oh, by the way, a Russian asset. That's why he's Mr. The Russian agent. That's why he's Mr. Reagan. God bless you. Nicely done, my friend. Can't wait for your next video. Follow him right now. He's Mr. Reagan on YouTube, and he is Mr. Reagan USA on Twitter. One of the best podcasts or YouTube videographers out there.
I mean, I don't know why the Russians seem to like her, but...
Because she's beautiful, okay?
I don't know why the Russians seem to like her, but honestly, I don't care. My girlfriend's theory is that it's because she's the most beautiful candidate. Russians are like, this is the only one that is at all reasonably attractive. I think maybe she is going to be the best one. But look, here's the important thing. Believe it or not, Russian interests and American interests can align. If Russians like Tulsi, that doesn't mean that Tulsi is necessarily not good for Americans. Look, I'm not going to vote for Tulsi, but she seems to think for herself, at least on some issues, and I respect that. But Democrats don't have that virtue. For them, it's all about the hive mind. If you think for yourself, you might disagree with the hive, and if you're not with them, you're against them. I was talking to my friend Kurt about this today, and his theory, which is brilliant, is that the left has a monopoly on education in America. And because they're teaching American kids to be leftists, it's not in their best interest to encourage them to be open-minded or to think for themselves, because then they might start to disagree. Just listen to us and obey.
So let's start with this, because before we went on the air this morning, you know who in the White House continued his rant against impeachment hearings, but he's not calling it a witch hunt anymore. He's tweeted, all Republicans must remember what they are witnessing here, a lynching.
This may be my fault. I actually used this term in a video that was posted the day before Trump used it. It's also clear to every rational conservative that the Ukraine impeachment is also a total farce. Even more obvious since they just got over their previous treasonous attempt to lynch our president. Now, I don't really think that I inspired Trump to say this, but who knows? Maybe somebody in his office watched my show and repeated the word to Trump. Perhaps not, but maybe. But if Trump didn't get it from me, it shows just how appropriate the word is, because two independent people, maybe several independent people, arrived at that word independently. Now, when I used the term, it was very intentional because lynching has a very specific definition. This is from the 1933 edition of the Oxford English Dictionary. The practice of inflicting summary punishment upon an offender by a self-constituted court armed with no legal authority. There is nothing about race in that definition. Lynching is the most specific and appropriate word to use in order to illustrate what is happening to Trump at the moment. If people are horrified by the use of the word because it's strongly associated with the tragic lynchings of innocent black Americans, well then that's great. That's the point. We're trying to express just how seriously evil what the Democrats are trying to do to the president is. And I, for one, believe such strong language is absolutely appropriate. I can use any example of a tragedy I want to indicate the lack of justice going on here. I mean, I can use white tragedies, Jewish tragedies, black tragedies. I don't care what the color or ethnicity of the people are that suffered. If there's an injustice and I want to use that as an example to illustrate what's happening here, I should be able to do that. And if you don't think that I can, well, maybe you're the racist.
When a giant 6-foot white guy says, I'm being lynched here, you understand why it's a little... You know, it may not be a totally black experience, but we're kind of the only folks that didn't come out from under the experience that was put on us, as you well know.
Oh, yeah, Whoopi, you never came out from under that. It's not like anyone put you in a ton of movies or anything. I mean, it's not like anybody gave you a TV show or something. Yeah, you're really suffering under the thumb of the white man. Give me a break.
You admit that it's an abuse of power, though, right? That
on
what he
sides.
did on the phone call, you would admit
no,
that what Trump
actually
did
don't.
was...
I went back and reread, because I knew this was going to come up. I reread the exact transcript that was published by the New York Times. I don't think it's an abuse of power.
Then what is? Because when I think about a president's role, if you call a foreign president, you ask them to investigate your opponent in a presidential race.
And look into the DNC server
if that's
as well.
Not,
right.
No, I'm actually curious. If that's not an abuse of power, then what is?
What is exactly what Hillary Clinton's campaign did. The Clinton, notice the difference. The Clinton campaign paid to create a dossier.
But can we talk about what's going on now?
Hillary, y'all have tried her. You beat her. She's not the president. The man who's the president broke the law.
No, I'm just trying to go out of scripture.
What are you doing?
Break the law.
You know, we're not gonna let you spin. Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. Did you? Oh, okay.
Hold on.
We'll be right back with more of Hot Topics.
Well, I would like to comment on Newt's remarks here, but I can't because he wasn't allowed to make them. We're not going to let you spin this, says Whoopi.
We're not gonna let you spin.
Leftists shouting obnoxiously to keep people from hearing what conservatives have to say. I don't believe it. That's never happened before. This is what it looks like when leftists are afraid of the truth, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so then after the commercial, they decided to hear him out, probably with conditions.
You say it's not an abuse of power and that he didn't do anything illegal. I've heard that from a number of people. So explain where you're coming from in that argument.
Well, I went back before the show and reread the actual conversation. Mm-hmm. He's asking the brand new reform president to find out what is the truth. Now, it cannot be a crime to try to find the truth.
Sure,
he didn't ask. He did not ask. How can it be a crime to find the truth?
She's going to tell you.
There are certain tribunals that you can go to. There are investigators that you can go to. You can go to your FBI, but you really can't go to a foreign government as the president to seek the truth because they are not your investigative tool. And Speaker, if you know that.
What? What are you talking about? Why can't you go to a foreign government? I don't think Sonny Hostin knows how international politics works.
In the conversation, he says, I'm going to have the Attorney General call you and work with you.
Yes, the Attorney General should also not be working with a foreign government.
Of course they should.
To investigate a political opponent.
But it's not investigating a political opponent. It's investigating an allegation of corruption.
Exactly.
He wouldn't be doing that if Biden were running for president.
There's no guarantee.
Excuse me while I spin.
Okay, so Whoopi uses a weak attempt at humor because she doesn't know how to respond effectively.
You can't announce you're a candidate and then say, therefore, I can't be investigated.
Exactly.
You can't announce you're a candidate and then say, therefore, I can't be investigated.
Well, he did.
No, he got investigated anyway.
But
That's my point.
By people in this country.
But by the right.
By officials in this country.
Right way.
And officials in this country and by a British secret agent and by a whole series of people in Europe. I mean, the whole effort to smear him was a multinational effort.
What? Well, oh, my Lord. Well, okay. So
okay, I can't do Joy. I'm sorry.
Look how difficult it is for the ladies to respond. They can't. They really know nothing about anything that's going on. They don't know what happened with Hillary and Russian collusion. I don't think they have any idea what happened with Ukraine. They can't respond to someone who actually... Now, the way that they're able to pretend that they know what they're talking about is that they're always just agreeing with each other. And the two people that are there to contradict the crazy leftists, right, Meghan McCain and Abby Huntsman, they don't do anything. They agree with them half the time, 90% of the time. They agree with them. It's like you have a bunch of Democrats there and two of them just call themselves conservatives, but they're totally not. Now that they have Newt in there, they cannot respond. They cannot respond to somebody who actually knows the facts about these issues.
So there are very different accounts of what top U.S. diplomat Bill Taylor's testimony yesterday. Taylor claimed that you-know-who personally ordered the withholding of vital aid to the Ukraine until Ukraine made a public pledge to investigate the Bidens and the 2016 election, that his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, set up a shadow diplomacy back channel. Democrats are like, this is it, baby. We got him now. But not everybody feels like that. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy did not believe that to be the case. Take a look.
In 90 seconds, we had John Radcliffe destroy Taylor's whole argument.
Congressman Radcliffe, tell us what happened.
Well, we can't really talk about it, but what we're finding is just his questioning in 90 seconds refuted everything of what Adam Schiff believes out there. There is no quid pro quo.
So, you know who echoed this earlier today, tweeting that do nothing Dems case is dead. Both sides heard the same testimony, though.
If there's one person to believe in this saga, I believe it's Bill Taylor.
Yeah.
This is one of the best that this country has to offer. His only interest is serving the American people. It is not serving Donald Trump. So when he went out and gave this testimony, I thought, what more do you need? What more do you need?
Bill Taylor did not trust Trump from the start. An article from BuzzFeed quotes an unnamed diplomat discussing why Bill Taylor took the job as charge d'affaires ad interim to Ukraine, and this diplomat says that Bill Taylor, quote, had some fears because he didn't trust the President of the United States. And if you read the tweets between Taylor and Sondland, it almost seems like Bill Taylor was trying to get Sondland to slip up so that he could have evidence that could help take Trump down. It looks to me like Taylor is not a Trump guy in any way, shape, or form. If Taylor was a Trump guy and testified this way, I'd weigh the accusation much more heavily. But as he's clearly anti-Trump, so what? A Trump hater is saying something bad about Trump. Whoa, my gosh, stop the presses. That's an old phrase, kids. But really, how much confidence can anyone possibly have in that testimony, especially when there are a million other people who have testified against the quid pro quo accusation, people closer to Trump who really knew what was going on? We already had Bill Taylor's perspective from the text. This testimony was not that shocking to me, nor was it particularly compelling. Now, Sunny Hostin tells everybody to read Bill Taylor's opening statement.
Yeah,
Since 1985.
So I'm taking, if he said that's what happened, I'm going with him.
Yeah, that's
I'm
how
going
I
with
felt.
him. I don't understand.
I think people should read his opening statement that's available online. It's about 15 pages.
Well, Sunny, I did read Bill Taylor's opening statement, and I have a couple of observations. He spends the first 2.5 pages insisting upon and presenting evidence to support the idea that he is a neutral and nonpartisan person who can be trusted. Such insistence is extremely fishy. I understand that some people will try to suggest that you are partisan, but if you're not partisan, proving that you're not shouldn't be too difficult. This level of preemptive strike, such an elaborate show of impartiality without the provocation of any accusations of impartiality, this indicates to me strong partiality. Clearly, this guy does not like Trump, and either he's out to get him or he's interpreting everything through a lens of anti-Trump bias. Either way, I think this guy's testimony can't be accepted without some scrutiny, without great skepticism. His opening statement was very similar to the whistleblower report. Everything in this statement was expressed in the nastiest way possible. You can make anything sound sinister if you express it the right way. He ate a sandwich. This goes against every norm of ethical political behavior that has been established for the past 3 decades at least. This was an egregious abuse of power, and I've never seen anything like it in my 20 years in the swamp. I mean, the government. I mean, really, a sandwich. That was my impression of Adam Schiff. Or was that a Chuck Schumer impression? I get them confused. But despite this clearly biased tone, Taylor makes clear that the aid to Ukraine was withheld so that the various U.S. government committees could assess whether or not the aid was necessary and effective. He specifically states that, quote, at one point the Department of Defense was asked to perform an analysis of the effectiveness of the assistance. Within a day, the Defense Department came back with a recommendation that the assistance was effective and should be resumed. Perfect. Great. Amazing. So Trump is thorough and the administration is doing their job. That's brilliant. You should be thrilled. Taylor mentions frequently in his statement that he was concerned that U.S. policy with Ukraine had changed, and everybody kept reassuring him that there was no change in policy. He made it clear that he was convinced from the beginning that Ukraine needed aid and should get aid, and it appears that after a thorough analysis, the executive branch agreed with him. The executive branch thoroughly investigating this is not a bad thing. Taylor seems to think that because he disagreed with the executive branch, that their decision to withhold aid until the use of such aid could be analyzed, that somehow because of this, I don't know, orange man bad. I don't think Taylor was ever actually concerned, though. This doesn't look like real concern to me. It looks like exactly what Comey did. This looks like an official who wanted to collect information on the president, information that he felt could eventually be mischaracterized in order to help destroy him. This looks like a swamp dweller's effort to manipulate the government to his own personal taste, regardless of the wishes of the elected representative of the people. the president. But even if he were actually concerned, he had to realize that Trump probably wasn't as intimately aware of the facts with regard to Ukraine as was Bill Taylor. Bill Taylor, of course, had been working with Ukraine for decades. It made sense that the administration was being thorough. Sure, they could have just deferred to Taylor, but Trump didn't know him personally. How could Trump know that he could be trusted? And clearly, Taylor could not be trusted. He turned out to be just the sort of swamp dweller that Trump promised to flush out, and it looks like the flushing is actually working. Throughout Bill Taylor's statement, time and time again, Taylor references the Trump administration's concerns about Ukrainian corruption. And that's really the problem with Taylor's speculation. He acknowledges the official concern, but emphasizes his own irrational speculation based on two disputed claims about Gordon Sondland. The first was a claim that Tim Morrison described a conversation between Gordon Sondland and Andrew Yermak in which Sondland issued the quid pro quo, financial aid for help with the Burisma investigation. But this is a third-hand account, not particularly convincing or reliable. The second claim is more compelling, as it's a first-person account. He claims that Sondland told him directly over the phone that Trump wanted Ukraine to make public statements about their commitment to investigate the 2016 election interference and Burisma. The thinking behind this strategy was that a public statement would make it harder for the Ukrainians to make promises that they had no intention of following through on. If you make a public statement, you're generally held to account by the press, other governments, this sort of thing. And that's brilliant. That's exactly the sort of negotiating our president should be doing with foreign leaders. Okay, so all the left-wing media outlets are saying that this testimony was devastating. Game over. But then Devin Nunes comes out and says on Hannity that actually, in a cross-examination by Representative John Ratcliffe, Taylor's entire story fell apart. According to Nunes, John Ratcliffe, quote, destroyed this witness.
Well, I was down there most of the day in this meeting with Ambassador Taylor. The truth is that in 2 minutes, John Ratcliffe destroyed this witness. There's no quid pro quo.
In 90 seconds, we had John Radcliffe destroy Taylor's whole argument.
Congressman Radcliffe, tell us what happened.
Well, we can't really talk about it, but what we're finding is just his questioning in 90 seconds refuted everything of what Adam Schiff believes out there. There is no quid pro quo.
So I go back to my previous point about Taylor being an anti-Trump swamp dweller. How much credibility can we give to Taylor? I think we ought to be extremely skeptical. In fact, even if the Democrats are right about everything, Trump did the right thing. They're characterizing this as asking a foreign government for help in investigating a political opponent. But if the political opponent is guilty of real corruption, that's good. The left is operating under this absurd assumption that Biden is clearly innocent and that Trump knows that. Well, maybe Biden is innocent. I don't think so, but even if he were, you can't just assume that Trump believes that and he's asking Zelensky to compose artificial dirt on Biden, as Schiff so creatively illustrated.
I want you to make up dirt on my political opponent, understand lots of it.
That is a huge jump in logic. It makes no sense at all. But that's the story that the left is going with. None of this really matters, though, because the aid was delivered. And there was a Trump-Zelensky meeting, and there was nothing delivered to the Trump administration. There was no public statement by Zelensky. There was no dirt on Biden provided, and Zelensky never knew that the aid was ever delayed or withheld at all. So this whole idea that Trump was leveraging Zelensky is moot. It's not possible. You can't leverage somebody unless they know that you're leveraging them. If Zelensky was unaware of this imagined quid pro quo, what's the point of the investigation? To determine whether Trump wanted one? You know what? This is exactly what the Democrats were saying with the obstruction thing after the collusion was proved to be a fantasy. Well, maybe Trump didn't actually obstruct, technically, but he wanted to. That's like putting Hillary in prison for wanting to kill Donald Trump. I'm sure she wants to, okay? But Trump is still alive. So investigating her for his murder at this point is absurd. But the coven will believe anything negative about the president, just like the congressional Democrats. They hate him, and they'll resort to treason, a kangaroo court, a coup d'etat, in order to oust this man who clearly loves America and is acting in America's best interest. Degenerates. Well, that's it for me. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. Good night.
Those who would trade our freedom for the soup kitchen of the welfare state have told us they have a utopian solution of peace without victory. They call their policy accommodation. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.